The Big Questions podcast. That's the name of the show. And I always ask the same question to all my guests the first time that they join me. So to me, it's the most interesting and the biggest question of them all. Who are you?
How am I, or who am I?
Who are you?
Who am I? That's a good question. I ask myself that every day. My name is Krisstal, and my YouTube is Eve Rising. And my main, I guess who I am now is I'm a spiritual teacher, but also a spiritual learner. I think any teacher realizes, any good teacher realizes that there's always learning. And I always say, like, you learn one thing a day, or you teach one thing a day. And so, I mean, I'm also a psychic, and I'm a medium. So I channel directly from, the divine source. But I have channeled from dead people before. I see spirit. But I also, like, I've been called an oracle or a mystic, whatever you want to call me. My background is for the last 10 years, I studied ancient Chinese medicine, Ayurveda. I was a lymphatic therapist. I was an oncologist therapist. I've kind of done everything. But when I get asked, who am I? My answer, I like to say, is I am an artist. Because if you're not creating art every day, then are you really living? So,
that's a good point. Yeah. And so what kind of art do you work with, or what's your method or your medium?
Everything. I like to refurbish old things. Or things that no one looks at, and I make jewelry with it. So I've made jewelry with old bullet casings. I've made jewelry with old forged nails. I like to paint. I'm a songwriter. Actually, that's one of my gifts, that after my Kundalini awakening, all of a sudden I could just write the most amazing song in 5 minutes. And I never was musically inclined before that. But recently I've been doing a lot of video projects. But my friend says, what do you want in the world? And I'm like, I want it all. I want to experience it all. I don't want to limit myself by, one medium. So
yeah, I can relate. Do you find that there's not enough hours in the day for you to do all the things you want to do?
Yeah. Before my awakening, no, I was always like, oh, I'm bored. But after my awakening, there's never enough time. There's an adventure right around every corner. There's magic everywhere, but we just forget how to look for the magic in the world. So, yeah, but now my to-do list has shifted, right? Because before, my to-do list was always about running my business, all these things I had to do, and these pressures I was putting on myself or society was putting on me. And now that I've kind of just left all that behind, I say that I blow with the wind. And so wherever the wind takes me, that's where I go. And now my to-do list is oh, I want to go meditate at this time. I want to go create this art piece. And it's vastly different. I made a complete 180 turnaround. So what I do now is to feed my soul, my heart, where what I did before was kind of to feed societal standard,
your bank account, your reputation, yeah, all that stuff. So I guess the elephant in the room, and the thing that I want to unpack with you here, is your awakening experience, and you refer to it as a Kundalini awakening. Could you define that or describe what that particular type of awakening is for the audience and for me?
Yeah. So I'm just gonna put it in layman's terms and be just so everyone can understand. A Kundalini awakening is when you balance all of your chakras or open them up. There's a lot of, a Kundalini awakening is vastly different than any other awakening that I've had. Because I've had awakenings throughout my life, and I've always been able to remote view and astral project. I've always been able to see visions of the future, but I always suppressed it. And that's because there was, these traumas lodged in my chakras. But I was doing a lot of shadow work about literally this time last year. And I was analytically going through my traumas and saying, okay, this is a trauma I have, and this is how I feel about it. And I was going to the depths of my psyche. And in doing that and meditating a lot, I was unknowingly at the time, I was balancing a lot of my chakras. And so there would also be like deep meditations where I would, intuitively go and hold different trigger points, different meridians, and open them up. This is what you do to balance your system. So once my system was balanced, I had a Kundalini awakening, which for me, my dog had died and he had been dead 11 days and I had not been able to eat or drink. I was so depressed. I lost like 30 pounds. And so that night in my deep meditation, the only thing I can describe it as was an angel came to me, the mother moon goddess, and my dog, but they were like spirits. Mm-hmm. And so they came and the angel like held my heart and I felt this cooling rush on my heart. They kind of touched me in a few places on my meridians, and the next day I had bruises on them. And then the mother goddess like came and held my head. And then after that, it was like I had the book of life opened up to me. So the Kundalini awakening and balancing your chakras, the physical symptoms that happen is your lymph nodes get really big. My lymph nodes were like the size of golf balls, and I was a lymphatic therapist. I had never felt lymph nodes the way mine felt. Skin hurt, your teeth hurt, your scalp, everything is so sensitive because what's happening is it's kind of like the old you is dying off and the universe is creating space in order for you to become the new you. And that's why it's really painful for a lot of people, especially growing up, Catholic. I had no idea what a Kundalini awakening was. And I had been in, the spiritual community for 10 years. So this was all new to me. So then after, and there's a lot of physical symptoms. There could be like 100, but that's just some of the ones I experienced. So after the angel, or whatever you want to call it, right? It's different to everyone. Mm-hmm. The next day, it was like I was able to see a different light frequency in the earth. So when I look at the moon now, to me, it does not look anything like what you guys see. I see like light coat in the air. It looks like Sanskrit. It looks like ancient Hebrew, and different things like that. Once I went through that awakening, I started getting visions, like way more visions of the future. I started getting waking visions. I started getting like classes, almost like massive downloads in my dreams, where I would wake up the next day and then just have so much knowledge that I had no idea how I had gotten it. That everyone's awakening can manifest in different ways. So like my third eye has always been wide open, even as a child. So I see a lot more, but there's also like clairsentient where people can feel. There's clairaudient where people can hear. And it's not like voices in your head. It's not like schizophrenia, but it sounds like a loudspeaker right outside your ear. But in the Kundalini awakening, it can manifest so many different ways for so many different people. And the less resistance you have towards it, then the more abundance and gifts that will be given to you. But it's very hard because through the Kundalini awakening, even though I was awoken and I balanced my chakras and I started getting these visions, it still took me another 4 or 5 months of shadow work, and it was painful. But after my Kundalini awakening, I also remembered some deep-rooted traumas that I had suppressed. Mm-hmm. And you can't shove it down. You have to go through it, because if it's anything emotional or in your subconscious mind, it doesn't go away. Mm-hmm. It has to balance somehow. And if you don't balance it, then it's going to physically manifest in an addiction, or it's going to physically manifest in like depression or anxiety and bipolar disorder. Mm-hmm. And that the West doesn't realize is, at least in these I always say ancient Chinese medicine and that stuff, it's been around for thousands of years because it works. And
Yeah.
they understand that the energetic body, the emotional state, and the physical state are all equally valid. But in the West, they're only looking at, oh, you have this back pain, go and take a pill. They're not asking why. So I hope I explained that okay.
Yeah, very interesting, and you did a good job explaining it. And I mean, obviously, I have many more questions, so it's I'm sure we'll unpack it some more. But you did say that the Kundalini experience, the Kundalini awakening, varies from person to person. What are some of the common threads that a person can say, okay, this is what defines it as Kundalini, or this is what makes it a Kundalini awakening? Like there are variables, but what are the pieces that are typically the same throughout?
Um, Generally, a Kundalini awakening is triggered by a trauma. So this could be like for me, it was my dog dying, but for other people, this could be, an abusive relationship. This could be like overcoming addiction or being traumatized from this. That could be anything traumatic, losing
Okay.
family, losing a job even, and feeling insecure.
So is there a dark night of the soul type of component to it? Is that kind of the sort of the entry point to a Kundalini awakening, is usually something, like you said, traumatic or quote unquote negative?
Yes, dark night of the soul for sure. Also a Kundalini awakening, at least with my other awakenings that I had, I never got physically ill because, and I mean, I've started having awakenings probably about 15 years ago, but tiny ones. But with a Kundalini awakening, the main markers physically are the sore skin, the lymph nodes, and then seeing a different light spectrum. So at least with my awakenings, all the other times before, I was never able to see a different light spectrum. And so it's really hard to describe to some people, but I don't know if you've ever done like acid. Well, you don't have to answer, but if anyone out there has,
not acid, but I've done mushrooms and psilocybin and other psychedelic substances. So,
well, you know how you can see, it looks like there's light frequency in the air, and you can see through it, but it's like you're able to see a different frequency while you're on those substances.
yep.
Well, that's what my waking life is like now. So what I see is vastly different than what other people see. And so, and it's also like I'm able to grab information out of the air, and like anything I want, if I meditate long enough, and if I'm able to access the information, because sometimes you're not ready for it. But for the most part, I can grab, it's like I grab exercises out of the air or through my deep meditations, for example. So what I want people to realize is all space and time is at the same place. But when you go through a Kundalini awakening, it's like you're able to grasp onto that a little bit more. And that's how you would access like your Akashic record, for example.
And just for the audience, again, what is the Akashic record?
It's a record where you can find all the information on your past lives. The theory behind it is that we all hold these like soul records. And so there's a reason why we don't remember when we come into this life, our past lives. And it's because we're just human. Like that's way too much for our head. But sorry, I have a plane going over.
No worries.
But the Akashic record it's something that you can grasp into and dive deep into in order to do like soul retrieval, in order to remember your past lives, in order to grasp information from beyond the veil. Because with my awakening, I was shown that we're a soul consciousness and we fracture off from each other. So all information of that soul consciousness can be tapped into through the Akashic record.
Very interesting.
You're not allowed to for different reasons.
Interesting. So have you spoken to other people who have had Kundalini awakenings? And if so, have you found that these are the kind of the similarities that you have observed in other people's experiences as well?
So I have met two people in real life who've had a Kundalini awakening, but that's it. And that's why I really want to get that message out there, because a lot of people are going through these Kundalini awakenings right now because we're at the end of a timeline. And so many people are being woken up from the future and they have no idea what's going on. They think it's crazy. A lot of them are like, I had someone message me the other day and they're like, can you help me? I'm really lost. And they're all really lost. They're scared. So in real life, I've only had two, but pretty much on my off time, I just go and I try to help as many people as possible by giving them exercises or sometimes just calming them down. Because if I heard during my awakening, like, this is normal, this is okay, and been validated, that would have meant a world of difference to me. But so yeah, in my free time, I just go and help as many people. And I have met a lot of people. There's a lot more people waking up with a Kundalini awakening right now, or it's being triggered. So my full Kundalini awakening just happened in February. But looking back, I think I had a mini Kundalini awakening when I was going through massage school, because I was all the shamanic healing and all the energy work. And so some people, they may have a small awakening, but not the full one.
Yep.
And then as far as, I have not to this point met anyone who's had an awakening like myself. Like, it dragged me through the mud. I had a massive awakening. And that's another reason why it was so hard to find information on it, because most people aren't going to have all the symptoms. They're not going to get all the abilities. Most people will get one or two. It depends on like how ready their body is and their soul contract. So to answer your question, I have met, if you're including online, I've met a lot of people who've been going through these. But as of right now, I've not met anyone who has come close to my awakening. But I know they're out there. I know people are out there.
Yeah, it's just degrees, right? I mean, we're talking about degrees of an experience, and maybe you went, the full 100%, but some people may get a 75% awakening or a 50%. And it's also just not a linear process, right? You can backtrack and you can awaken and then go back to sleep a little bit and then wake up again. And, yeah, very interesting. So you were doing massage therapy when you had this sort of awakening experience in February, or had you already moved on from that career?
No, I was doing massage still, but after my dog died, I was not able to massage anymore. I'm going to start again soon. But I literally like could not touch people. Well, first of all, like, if you're ever getting a massage or energy work, you don't want someone to touch you who's unstable in their emotional state, because energy is sticky, so it can transfer.
Yeah.
So first of all, it's like my responsibility to not touch other people, especially because I was working with, cancer patients and people with autoimmune diseases. But also I could not, like, I could barely eat. I could barely stay like grounded. So even just for myself, like, I could not physically massage after that. And so that's when I went into van life. I had met my ex at a festival, and he was talking about how he wanted to be a nomad. And this is like right during my awakening. And it just like clicked. And I was like, I want to be a nomad. So I gave my notice within like 5 days, and within like 2 weeks, I was gone. And that was the most scary thing I've ever done, because I was always a very meek person. I was always to go adventure on my own. But it was the most healing thing, because, I made my own fire, without a man. I was able to travel, and I went to all the different hot springs. And so I needed to be in nature in order to heal. And most people, I think, could heal if the noise is quiet, if they have a safe place to, call home. I wasn't afraid of like traveling by myself in my CRV, but I was afraid of being in the city. So it's kind of like what's important to you.
Mm-hmm.
But did I answer your question?
Yeah, I don't even remember what my question is. I'm just trying to unpack the story here and get to the meat of it. And I think, I mean, we're definitely in there now. So I think the other interesting part to me that I always like to check in with people on is, you know, you were getting downloads, you were getting a lot of information. How much of that information was actionable in your day-to-day life? How much of it was relevant and practically applicable to what you were going through day in and day out as a human being embodied in this sort of state?
So a lot of it actually. So I actually like through my dreams, and through my waking visions, I was given like a lot of exercises, or it was knowledge that I already had. Like if we're talking about the 5 element theory in ancient Chinese medicine, I had already studied that like briefly, but it didn't make sense to me. And so it was through those downloads where I was able to view it from a completely different light. I was able to fully understand it. And by these downloads, I was able to really heal myself. A lot of the things that I was gifted, the sacred knowledge, it was tools for me to heal myself, tools for me to go into my subconscious mind, tools for me to clean my chakras. All of my exercises that I give out are, well, first of all, they're completely free. I don't ask anyone for money. But second of all, they were never exercises that I did in like massage school, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Everything I do has been gifted to me, and I believe it so I can give it to other people to help. And then there's, you know, things that aren't actionable, but like it would show me the synchronicities to have me start believing in my visions of the future.
Right.
Because before my awakening, I didn't believe in the angels. I didn't believe in any deities. I didn't believe in God. I just thought there's a source energy and I'm not going to know until I die. So I'm not going to say anything about it. But after that, I mean, I've met deities, I've met souls, seen a lot of different spirits. I even went, you know, like in a waking vision, I went to heaven. And then I also went to, I don't think I went all the way to heaven when I died, but, you know, so now it's like I've seen it all. I've had the entire universe in my mind. It was even shown, you know, like the beginning of the universe and the divine or source God, how they speak to us is through art. You know, so my waking visions, it will look sometimes like a cartoon, but it's like a movie, the most vibrant movie. So then a lot of it just wasn't actionable, but they would show me, you know, since my awakening, I've been shown thousands and thousands of signs to where they were always there, but I didn't know how to look.
Yeah.
And then, you know, there's visions of the future which aren't actionable. And I question whether some of these visions, like, because time is fluid. So when I in, I question, you know, whether I am seeing all the different possibilities out there, the different ways you can, you know, go. But that was very hard because when you see visions of the future, you always ask, like, well, what's your responsibility to other people? And so at first I did, you know, tell several people, and, you know, I had friends cut me off, which really hurt, but I was still having to speak my truth. And now that I put it out there, I don't know. I don't think it's actionable. There's nothing for me to do except help other people go through their awakening. So it doesn't bother me, but at first it did bother me seeing all the future. So,
Possible futures, you're saying, not necessarily the future, but possibilities of what may come.
yeah, but I do have to, but I do have to say that. So I get visions for my personal life, and then I get visions for the future of Earth. And I have to say that every vision I've had for my personal life has come true.
Wow.
I have not yet had any that have not come true. So, but you know, that's a singular reality that I'm living, right?
Yeah.
So it just could be vastly different for everyone, but that's what at least my experience.
Cool. And so in terms of visions of possible futures for the world, you're saying, a lot of that stuff isn't actionable, but don't you think that if you have an idea of what may come, you can do something in the present moment to either ensure that it happens, if that's something that you want to happen, or you can start working to undermine that so that it becomes less likely to materialize? Don't you think there's something you can do in the present moment, even if it's small, to sort of sway things one way or another?
Well, yes. And that's exactly what I'm doing. I think before you can heal the world, you have to heal yourself. And so, I may not be able to do much, but what I do, I mean, ever since my awakening, my entire purpose in my life, everything I do from the time I wake up, I start meditating. When I go to bed, I'm meditating. I'm at my altar, doing my prayers and meditation and singing and dancing for hours a day. I'm doing my videos in order to get as much information out there as possible so other people don't feel so scared and alone. Like when I'm on Reddit, for example, I just go to the new post and I try to give advice to everyone that I can. And I've had a really good response. Like in this week, I've had like 20 people messaging me, scared and lost and wanting to know what to do. Yeah. And so I definitely think like every little thing you do counts. And I'm not going to turn my back on anyone who's lost just because they don't have money. And we're in a world where, you can't find healing if you don't have money. And I don't agree with that. So I do think that, our actions every day, I do believe we have free will. I think there's precipice points you have to hit along your way, and that's part of your soul contract.
Yep.
But in that we have free will. And so I believe just by, unplugging from the media, unplugging from social media, by working on yourself internally and trying to help as many people as I can, I think that's raising the frequency and vibration of Earth. So
absolutely.
Instead of worrying about, my visions of the future, because I can't do anything about that right now. But what I can do is help as many people through their awakenings as possible. So that's been my main goal.
Nice. Yeah, I think it's the Sufi mystic Rumi who says, when I was clever, I tried to change the world. Now I'm wise, I only try to change myself. And love that's how you can change the world as well, which is paradoxical, right? The best way to change the world or to help people around you is to help yourself and to heal yourself, right? And then you can become a source of healing for others, but you got to start with yourself. Absolutely. And that sounds like the journey that you're on.
Yeah. Well, you can't pour from an empty cup. You have to fill your cup first. And people are like, what does that mean? But how you fill your cup is, first of all, you go towards your heart space. You have to open up your heart chakra. Mm-hmm. All the other chakras, like, yeah, we can clean them slowly through time. But if you don't open up your heart chakra is your intuition. You have more brain cells in your heart than you do your mind. But in this world, everyone's leading with their mind, right? And no one's leading with their heart space. So the more you open up your heart space, then the more you're able to receive the healing in divine timing.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, the path of the heart.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I always say we can't be a world full of monsters. And if no one forgives the monsters, they're going to continue to be monsters. So my main is about just forgiveness for yourself and for other people. And I've had people do me wrong. And I mean, it bothered me for a long time, but I healed my heart and I forgave myself first and foremost. And then I forgave the other people. And that's how we're going to heal, right? Is you have to go at it with a level of forgiveness for everyone.
Absolutely. Yeah. Have you ever read a book called Love is Letting Go of Fear? I believe it's called.
No.
Yeah, I just started reading it literally. And again, the synchronicities for me, I mean, especially when I start connecting with people like yourself, that there's always the conversation that I'm having, it always ties into something else that I'm doing in my life or a book that I'm reading or and you're speaking right to this book. I mean, it's yeah, the title says it all. Love is letting go of fear. I mean, and it's all about forgiveness and letting go and coming at life from a place of love and centeredness. And so I mean, that's what you're helping people do.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing I want you to realize, or I, not you, but other people, is the more we hold on to that pain and that trauma, well, it creates our identity.
Mhm.
And the more it creates our reality in which we're living. And I know it's not as simple as just saying, oh, I'm over it, because that doesn't work. You actually have to like analytically go through why you're hurt and then feel the emotion. And, you know, if you continue to create your identity around, you know, this trauma or being hurt, well, then you're never going to move forward. So the forgiveness is for, you know, if someone hurt you or if you hurt someone, the forgiveness is for yourself. You have
Right.
to forgive yourself before you can forgive others.
Mhm.
And when you forgive others and you forgive yourself, then your whole life opens up and you see the magic everywhere because you're not dwelling on the trauma of the past because that keeps you stuck. And we actually, obviously I'm in America, but I definitely believe that all the systems in place, like the private prison systems, the war on drugs, the pharmaceutical company, is all developed to be broken on purpose. Because if you can keep an entire society in pain and in trauma, well, they're never going to find their own divinity.
Mhm.
So I know that working through these traumas and the shadows, I know it's really difficult, but that's how you are going to get through it. And I hear a lot of people say, oh, I don't want to have a Kundalini awakening because all I hear about is it's so painful. Like before my awakening, I was walking dead my whole life. And I had had a lot of spiritual, you know, experiences. Um, but I always I just didn't dwell on it because I was always worried about my pain or trauma.
Mhm.
And so that was creating my reality. But once I worked through the pain and trauma, then I was able to see, you know, God, source, spirit, the divine. I was able to see the beauty and the magic in the world. And there's magic everywhere, but we forget to look for it.
Yeah, it was there all along, but we didn't have eyes to see it until, you know, whatever experience woke you up to that reality. Yeah. Are you a fan or a student of Carl Jung by any chance? I mean, you talked about shadow work. You also almost paraphrased him when you said, you know, that which is repressed only grows stronger. You know, or have you looked into him at all or gotten any value from him?
Um, actually, I actually don't look up anything because I want all of my information to come directly from source and I
Mhm.
don't want it to be convoluted. And so if I don't have an answer, sometimes I'll have to think about it for a couple of days, you know, and come to my own conclusions. Um, I I've heard of Young, but I have not looked into him at all. Um, the
Fair enough.
only teacher I would say that I looked into maybe like 10 years ago was like Eckhart Tolle.
Mhm.
Uh, but besides for that, I do try to get it as directly from source as possible.
Oh, that's
So,
fascinating. Yeah, I spent the first probably 7 years of this spiritual journey, getting it from the great teacher via proxies, you know,
uh,
through the mouths of other human beings. That you know, to me, I see the great teacher, the source of all wisdom. When I examine the Bhagavad Gita, for example, or the Tao Te Ching, I see the same lessons, the same wisdom. So to me, it comes from a single source, even though they're miles apart in terms of culture and era. They're saying the exact same thing. And you look at different things like Marcus Aurelius' Stoic philosophy, they're saying the exact same thing. So if you find it here and here and here and here and here, to me, it's like, okay, this is something that's worth exploring and looking at. And then to me, it indicates that it's all coming from the same teacher. It's just that the teacher uses many different proxies to communicate and share knowledge and wisdom. But like yourself, I'm finally now starting to commune with the great teacher directly and getting those messages directly from the source. And there's a different quality to it because it comes out of your own sort of hand. You know, like I'll be writing in my journal and it's like stuff like I'm not thinking about it. It's just coming out. And then I read it after and I'm like, I didn't write that. I mean, my hand was moving, but it didn't come from me.
I just want to touch bases on that. That would be automatic channeling.
Yeah.
There's many different ways to channel. Like when I channel, I meditate for 30 minutes before I turn my videos on. And then when I turn my videos on, it's just like the thoughts are just popping in my head, coming out my mouth, and then they're gone.
Yeah. Spirit's taken over.
Yeah. But what you're doing is automatic channeling. And I just wanted to touch bases on that because that is another ability that you would get, if you had a Kundalini awakening. Now, some of these abilities you'll have before a Kundalini awakening, but after it would be like that ability, but on steroids. So if anyone out there does that, then in case they were wondering, that's what that's called.
And that's very cool. I didn't know. Yeah. Again, it's a recent thing for me in the last, I mean, it started a couple of years ago, but really now it's like on a daily basis. And like you, I start off by getting into that quiet place and meditating. And then I don't have to wonder because, 15, 20 minutes into my meditation, all of a sudden it's like, oh, whoop, okay, bring out the journal, start writing because it's coming now. It's flowing, right? But yeah. And again, do you think that these are symptomatic of all awakening experiences to some degree? Or because I mean, we're talking about a Kundalini awakening. I certainly don't think that that's what I experienced back in 2013. Based on your description of it, I had a very different experience, but it seemed to have led us to very similar destinations, let's say, and beliefs and experiences. So even though it was a different type of awakening, do you think that all of these experiences at some point or to some degree are moving in the same direction and leading people in the same direction?
Definitely moving people in the same direction. However, I do so yes, all awakenings, they have the same concepts, right? And depending on, this kind of goes into epigenetics, depending on what your ancestors, what their abilities were and how much they honed them, well, that's in your genetic code. And then that, it's called like junk files. But you can grasp for that information. And so like if, your ancestors were very clairvoyant and you had never opened your third eye before and you started practicing that because your ancestors did that work, then you're able to activate, those junk files in your epigenetics. So that's kind of like why you have these same not symptoms, but abilities throughout different awakenings, because it is in your junk files, but it is in your epigenetics. And different levels of awakenings, they do activate your DNA in different ways. And so that's why you're seeing the same concepts. But I do have to say, there is nothing, in my experience, nothing like a Kundalini awakening. I also want to say that during my Kundalini awakening, the night like the deity or the angel and the mother moon goddess came to me with my dog, I was completely sober. Mm-hmm. And I had never seen like spirits like that in my room before. But there's just absolutely, from my experience, nothing like a Kundalini awakening. And I had done San Pedro before. I had done mushrooms, acid, DMT. Wow. And even though I was, on those substances at different times, there was still nothing more profound or beautiful than the Kundalini awakening completely sober.
Yeah, interesting. And that's, I think, a parallel as well between your experience and mine is that, if I think of the top 5 most profound psychedelic experiences I've had in my life, the number 1 psychedelic experience I had, I didn't take any substances for it. I was like you, completely sober, sitting in my cubicle at work, surrounded by colleagues. And it was just like, and it was an amazing experience. And again, I've never experienced anything like it before or since. But I didn't, again, very different in terms of what happened afterwards. I didn't get physical symptoms, like in terms of like sensitive skin or anything like that. And I didn't, part of me, my little ego is envious because I've spoken to a couple people now, yourself included, and, shifting dimensions, encountering beings. I've never had that. I've never gone that far. If it's about distance, then I've never gone that far, but I certainly experienced the reality shift where in a mere moment, everything changed. and nothing changed, but everything was completely different. And it just nothing physical changed, but my entire mindset, my entire perspective, my entire experience of life shifted in a very drastic way. So that part I've been able to relate to, but it's pretty incredible that there are these spirits and these beings all around us all the time, inside of us even, right? Because I mean, sometimes these things I think are a manifestation of a part of us that we've either repressed or didn't know about. All these entities, these spirits, these beings are all around us. And it's interesting to me that some people can really pick up on them, like yourself, and other people like me, we're just completely dead to it. Like I don't see any of that stuff. I don't experience it. The closest thing I've come to is this, what you called direct channeling, which fairly recent phenomenon in my life. But so what do you think makes the difference between being able to see these beings, interact with them, and not?
So first of all, the deities and the beings, they have to want to work with you.
Mm-hmm.
So I also have a video on like how do I know which deities to work with and to pray to.
Mm-hmm.
I have to say all the deities that I work with and pray to me have come to me. I see them in my Callie Moss started coming to me like a week ago in my meditations, and she's visited it every night. And but if you want to work with a specific deity, I would start praying to them. And you can even like talk to them like in your head, just as like you may not get a response, but if you're always keeping them in your thought process, I leave offerings for mine. And the more I like pray to them, then the more they're able to lend me their knowledge or their power. Now, if you haven't worked with any deities, I would say look at what your heritage is, because once again, this goes back into your ancestors. The more groundwork they laid, the more they like prayed to these deities, then the more, the easier it will come to you. But if you don't know your heritage, then just pick one that shines out to you. The other thing, I never saw any deities or angels or spirit in real life until my Kundalini awakening. So maybe that's a marker of like a full-blown Kundalini awakening.
Yeah.
I had seen, this is a story for another time, but I had seen, that stuff when I had died, but I wasn't consciously like seeing that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things, like, if I was giving you spiritual advice, right? One of the things I would say is a lot of people expect, like when we're seeing deities, a lot of people would expect like an angel or a deity to fly down and be like around them in person, but that's not how it works. So a lot of times we don't see because we don't know how to look, or we're putting expectations on what we're supposed to see or supposed to hear or supposed to feel. Now, every time I've seen spirits or the deities or anything, it's either like through scrying, it's through scrying, like fire scrying, or if you get like a coppered hammered cup and you start scrying that way, that's where I've gotten a lot of my visions. So it's like kind of like the crystal ball, right?
Okay, I was going to say scrying is like peering into the flames until you start to see visions and things of that nature.
Yes, you're turning off your conscious mind and you're activating your reticular activation system. And so when you turn off your conscious mind, and this could take 30 minutes, this could take an hour for some people, but the more you zone out, then the more that you're actually able to grasp onto the energy in the air.
Mm-hmm.
That could be a form of channeling, right? That's how I get a lot of my visions. But, and then the deities, they'll show up in my dreams, but they'll show up, in my scrying sometimes, and they'll take me all over the universe. But most people are putting restrictions on their abilities or restrictions on what they're able to receive, mm-hmm. because they only want to see things one certain way. And
right.
It doesn't work that way. So
that makes a lot of sense. Actually, people kind of see what they believe in a sense. And so you have to be open to the possibility of these spirits, these sentient beings, these deities, in order to even have the chance of experiencing them. Because if it's not a possibility in your mind or in your heart, they're not going to be revealed to you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that actually makes a lot of sense, and it goes a long way to kind of explain to me why I only ever encountered one being or one sort of presence in all of my journeys, is because my understanding is that there's only one supreme being in the entire universe, and we are divine expressions of that being. And so for me, there are, if there were deities, they would just be expressions of that one supreme being, whatever the nameless source, whatever you want to call it. And so I guess for me, the manifestation of it is that one source. I don't see deities. I just see the great teacher, or I speak with the great teacher. But it all depends on how you're approaching it and how you perceive it in your own mind. And you're going to see and encounter the things that you're open to seeing and encountering, essentially.
I definitely are all different faces of God, right? I think we're at the rise of Christ consciousness. So I think God has, we split off. There's still like the supreme God. And I've seen him, but he's two parts. And he's not really, he's, the yin and the yang, the light and the dark, the feminine and the masculine. There you go. And
yeah,
so
that's my conception as well. Yeah.
That's literally what I saw through, my waking visions.
Yeah.
And in that we've got, all the different dimensions. So, I mean, there's things that I know that I've been gifted with that I know, like, for my truth. But then in that, there's a lot of room for my interpretation. And I try to interpret it with as little ego as possible. But I'm still really curious about this stuff too. So even though I've seen different deities and stuff like that, like for me, I'm wondering, are they just different dimensional beings that I see as God?
Mm-hmm.
So, because I know there's like the supreme source or God above that. And then I've seen so many different gods and deities where like Thoth has taken me all over the universe. And I didn't even know who Thoth was at first. So in my visions, I'm just drawing, like this guy with robes and a bird head until I could figure out who he was. But are they all different faces of God? And I think that's the main message, right? Is I believe we're a soul consciousness fractured off from ourselves to experience light body, to experience love, to experience the human existence, which is pain, and to learn how to overcome that, to go more towards the light. But in that, if you believe we're all soul consciousness, then we really have to start doing better, like for the earth, for ourselves and for others. We have to, start treating animals better. Like whether you eat meat or not, you have to admit the meat industry is just despicable. And how 100%. Would you want to be treated that way?
Yeah. Well, and I think if we look to indigenous cultures, we can see how we can both be carnivorous and also honor the beings that are sustaining us, and not being, using every part of the animal, honoring the animal. There's a ritual around it that forces you to recognize the sacrifice that this creature has made so that your tribe can eat. We can learn a lot about that. But sorry, I'm not trying to derail the conversation into meat eating and veganism and things like that. But yeah, I agree with you. I mean, whether you eat meat or not, it's not hard to see that the way we're doing it now is unethical, unsustainable, immoral. Like it's just wrong in so many ways.
I don't think eating meat is morally wrong, but how we treat the animals is just the most disgusting thing I've ever seen. And I actually, I lived at a farm at another point in my life, and they grew meat chickens, and then they harvested them. And seeing it done the right way, it's completely different. The animal felt no pain. It was dead within like literally 1 second, had no idea what was going on. Didn't suffer at all. Those chickens
lived a happy, healthy life, right? Ate good food and was treated well while she was alive, while they were alive. And that's the key, is like, while they're living, treat them, honor them, like treat them well, because they're literally your life. Like they're sustaining you. So like abusing them, giving them the wrong food, like stuffing them full of soy and corn when they are supposed to be eating grass, like all of those things, like it's all geared around greed and maximizing profits.
Yeah, we definitely need to start doing better for ourselves and for the world. And that can go into so many different aspects, right? But even, these chickens that were harvested, most people don't understand how much it takes to put into your food. And so a normal, like, at least in America, a normal chicken breast is like this big now. And the one that we got from this chicken that didn't have corn or soy, it was like a quarter of the size.
Yeah.
And so it made me like appreciate, like, if I eat meat, like I eat every part of the meat. I don't disrespect the animal by throwing it away. And at the time I had been vegan, but seeing how it's done the right way had kind of turned me around. But we just need to start doing better we need to start treating things, everything, how we want to be treated.
Mm-hmm.
And if anyone could just go back to the first day of kindergarten and really learn that concept, treat people how you want to be treated, the world would be vastly different.
Yeah. And I was talking about the parallels that you find in all the different spiritual paths and how you can identify the great teacher through those parallels. And I think the golden rule is something that you find in literally every single spiritual tradition, from the Bible to Confucianism to, you name it, right? Do unto others. I mean, it's called the golden rule for a reason, right?
I'm so glad that you went back to that, because I got derailed earlier and I wanted to say something too.
Mm-hmm.
I've always said, because I've studied Ayurveda and ancient Chinese medicine and different cultures, but those are the two main ones. And I've always said they're saying the exact same thing, but in different languages. And that's, if you look back, believe it or not, because a lot of my past lives have been, Egyptian, ancient Egyptian. So believe it or not, their teachings, and for the most part, different words, different characters, same as the Bible teaching. The Bible has been, they've just kind of took everything from every different religion. I'm not saying Jesus wasn't a person, but like his teachings were the same as the teachings 2,000 years prior, and their teachings were the same 2,000 years prior.
Yeah.
So it's like the great teacher, just like you said.
Yeah, it's interesting because you're totally right. I mean, there are so many parallels between the sort of mythos of Jesus as it is told in the Bible and other mythological characters like Osiris or Bacchus, or, the death and resurrection motif is not unique to Jesus. It predates Jesus by millennia. And of course, I think if you want to get into the sort of interpretation of it, it does seem to come back to the sort of agricultural revolution and the fact that the year dies, the sun dies every year and is reborn again. And, that there's all these rituals and celebrations around the solstice and the equinox. And it's like everything seems to come back to the sort of immediacy of life that our ancestors experienced, right? Like for them, these stories were telling them about the movement of the seasons, when to plant food, all these different things. And it just kind of evolved from there. But you find the same motifs in all the different myths. And to me, that doesn't dismiss or discredit them. It gives them even more importance, more power. There's has to be something here, because if it was just one person saying it, all right, let's check it out. But if this person is saying it and this person and everybody's saying it in different ways, like you said, in different languages, then to me, that is something worth investigating. There's something there.
I always read, like if I'm reading a story from the Bible, which I've only cracked open the Bible a few times since my awakening, but I always read a story 3 ways. And when you start to read it from 3 different perspectives, you would be surprised how much more information you can get from it. So I read it, realistically. Then I read it, what I think it interprets. And then I read it in a storybook manner. Like if you're reading it like a fairy tale or myth, well, what's the moral of the story?
You're right.
So if people start to read, things in 3 different perspectives, it's kind of like an exercise, but you would be surprised how much more knowledge opens up to you.
Absolutely. Yeah. As a young sort of self-identified atheist, I guess you could say, I regarded things like the book of Genesis and the story of the Garden of Eden as complete nonsense, a myth of ancient ignorant peoples. But like you said, as I've learned to read and interpret things in different filters and to look at the sort of metaphorical meaning of things, now all of a sudden I look at the same stories and I'm like, they were telling the truth about the human condition. The fruit from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, duality. That's how we went from being at one with everything to I'm me and you're you, and this is the environment and these are animals, and we ate from the fruit. And that's, whether there was a literal fruit or if that's just a metaphor for the leap in consciousness that occurred when we evolved a bit. either way, that duality takes you out of that centered, unified space where you are at one with everything. And so to me, that story, even though it may probably never literally happened, is nevertheless eternally true about the human condition, you know?
Hmm. I love that you use that story. I actually think I was kind of shown this throughout my awakening as well, but Eve eating the apple was a state of enlightenment for her. It was
That's
an
right.
awakening. And some people think, oh, she ate mushrooms. I personally think after having a Kundalini awakening, I think she had a Kundalini awakening and like activated different parts of her DNA. And then that's why, like, Eve's the mother to all children. But I think it's because she activated this part. So when her children came after, they had the ability to activate, their epi or activate, different parts of their DNA. And then also like reprogram their epigenetics.
Yeah,
So
right.
a lot of people think Eve eating an apple is bad, but I mean, if she gave,
We'd
humans
still be animals. We'd still be like all the rest of the animals if she hadn't, completely ignorant of our own mortality, no knowledge of duality. And, I always tell people duality is a powerful and very convenient illusion. Duality, yeah, there is no such thing as opposites. There's just one unified whole. But viewing the world through the filter of duality has allowed us to do what we're doing right now, create technology that allows us to communicate thousands of miles apart from each other. So, I always caution people not to dismiss or demonize duality because it is one of the most important illusions that human beings have ever conjured. And so, yeah, without that the ability to distinguish between, self and other, right and wrong, up and down, west and east, we'd just be like chimpanzees, or you know what I mean? Which there's nothing wrong with that. But the point is, we did evolve beyond that. And I think this knowledge of duality is one of the things that distinguishes us from the rest of the animal kingdom.
you need both parts. You need the darkness and the light. And
Yeah.
then within that, it has the shadows, right? And so that's the trinity of you is the light, the dark, and then the shadows. So when you balance them all, then going forward, you're completely fine. But most people aren't balanced. Most people are mostly dark, and or mostly shadows. Now, you could be mostly dark and have your shadows and still be a good person, but all it means is you, instead of healing from this trauma or whatever it was in your life that lodged itself in your chakras, instead of healing, you suppress it, and that's why you become mostly shadows and mostly dark. You could still be a good person and be completely unbalanced that way, and that's
Right.
very important.
Yeah, or you build a story around it, right? Like a victim story. Like, this is who I am. I'm a victim because these things happened to me when I was this age, and now as a result, I'm this way, and this is the way it is. This is my reality. And that story becomes a person's reality. But yeah, it's very interesting what you said about that Trinity. If we look at it again from in terms of the Eden story, that you're in the garden and blissfully ignorant, you're out of the garden and you have the knowledge of good and evil. What's the third option? You got to have one foot in and one foot out. You got to keep a part of you in that garden where you're in that centered place, the eternal present moment. But every once in a while, you got to step out and do your business as a human being in the realm of duality, right?
Uh, I think maybe the third part of that trinity would be accessing your subconscious mind and bringing it to your conscious mind.
That's right. Integration.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the key. Wholeness and integration. That's again, for me, it's been in the last year, it's all coming to those sort of themes of walking the path of love. And the path of love is the path of wholeness, is becoming whole. And like you said, integrating your shadow, unearthing the traumas that you've been repressing, bringing them up to the light and integrating them, processing them functionally so that they're no longer governing you from below the surface, or, causing issues or whatever.
Well, yeah, your shadows are going to control you unless you control them. And how you control them is you go into your subconscious mind. Some people will do soul retrieval. Um, but a very easy way to do shadow work, because everyone always hears about shadow work, right? Mm-hmm. What is it? But a really easy way to do it is if you look back on your life, all of the traumas that really bother you. I always tell people to journal it. Well, I had this one experience. This is how it made me feel. These are my habits that I have to protect my heart now. with this traumatizing experience. And I tell them to break it down very analytically. And then and put every emotion, everything on that piece of paper. And then I tell them to wait like a month and go back and read it and see from a higher perspective. Wow, that was a really messed up situation I was in as a child. That should have never happened to me. That was unacceptable. And that helps them get, first of all, their subconscious mind out. They notice little details that were hiding within, their shadows. And then they're able to see it from a higher perspective in order to have compassion for themselves. And then they forgive themselves, and then they can work on forgiving the other person. And this works even if, some of our shadows we have in our subconscious mind are traumas that we gave to other people when we acted poorly. And so if you're going through the shadow work, you can lie to everyone else, but you can't lie to yourself, and you can't lie to God. And so, there's things I've done in my life where I really hurt people. And that was harder. It was way harder to forgive myself for hurting other people than it was to forgive other people for hurting me. Yeah. But that's the duality, right? You still have to go through your subconscious mind, whether you hurt or whether you were hurt. And so then I tell them, go back after a month and read it. And then after that, like, have as many emotions as you want. And this may take a long time, but cry it out, go scream it out, write an apology letter, to yourself or to someone else. And that's a very analytical way of where people can start doing shadow work on themselves. Shadow work doesn't have to be all like, voodoo and magic. Sometimes it's just very analytical.
Yeah. And I think that your suggestion there is brilliant. I think finding a way to externalize the event or the trauma, and I think writing it down is definitely a great way to do that, creates separation and allows you to gain perspective on it. Because when it's inside of you as just this thing, it's really hard to gain perspective on it. But when you externalize it, write it down as a story, then all of a sudden it's a concrete thing that you can observe, analyze, as you said, study, and break it down. So great advice, great method. And that's what you were doing essentially when you were doing shadow work. You said you took a kind of an analytical approach. So this was it?
Yeah, I had to take an analytical approach because I had to write it down because I wasn't even allowing myself to feel compassion for myself. And I, I've had a very traumatic life, and I would never like to tell anyone because they would feel pity for me. And I never wanted to, they would feel pity or compassion for me. And I never wanted them to feel pity or compassion for me because I wasn't even at a stage where I could do that for myself.
Right.
Because you grow up in trauma or you have these traumatizing experiences, you're numb to everything. And a lot of traumas like to lodge themselves in your first and second chakra, which is, your reproductive organs. It's your sexual pleasure. It's your, like, how much do you enjoy food? Are you happy? And so when these traumas happen to us as a child, it fractures our inner child. And then our first and second chakra, they're so numb to where we don't even enjoy life. We start walking around dead.
Right.
And so it's like the hardest thing to start, because if someone's walking around numb, they think that they're happy, but really they're being controlled by their shadows. And so I have a video on how to clean your chakras, but the more you work on this, the more thought out you become. And then the more you thought out those two chakras, then the more you'll start to cry, the more you'll start to have compassion for yourself. And I really think everyone needs to have compassion for themselves, whether they did wrong or wrong was done to them. Because if you don't forgive yourself, then once again, we're going to be a world full of monsters.
Yeah. Wow. It really is key. And I like what you said earlier too, about forgiveness being not about the other person, but about relieving yourself of that burden, right? Because you're holding on to a grudge, you're holding on to this resentment or whatever it is. And so when you forgive the person, it's not to do them any favors. It's so that you can be relieved of that burden.
Exactly. I like how you put it.
Well, yeah. And I mean, and then that opens up the weight of love, right? I mean, you can't radiate love when you've got all these walls up because you've been hurt, you've been banged up, right? You put up all these fortresses around your heart, and then like maybe there's a little crack in the wall and a little bit of that love light comes through, to specific people in your life that you love. But the point is to become a floodlight of love, so that you're not just giving it in a pinpoint to somebody, you're giving it out like just all around you. It's just radiating from you, right? And that requires vulnerability and being open. And that's scary for, I mean, for myself as well as other people, I imagine.
Yeah. And I did want to touch base on, this is what I call the trauma guilt complex. And this has to do with shadow work. But um, most people have a tether, to the divine through their crown chakra, or they have a tether, down through their sacral chakra, and it goes into the earth. Now, what the divine always shows me in my mind's eye is like I always want to say fiber optic cable, but in all honesty, I have no idea what that looks like. To me, that's what it looks like in my mind's eye, but a big cable that's clear. And that's where the light comes in and grounds you to the earth and to the heavens, as above, so below. But when we have this trauma in our system, or this trauma guilt complex, instead of it, putting up all light as above, so below, it's like you have this oily gunk stuck in that cable. And so the more you go through your shadow work, the more you go through your trauma and heal yourself, then the more it's like you're cleaning up that gunk in your tether, and the more light can come through. And the more you do that, then the easier it becomes to start seeing things like clairvoyance, the easier it becomes to remote view, astral project, the easier it is to meditate, the easier it is to channel, or whatever abilities you have, then the more you're getting it directly from source. And that I do believe, people are kept in this trauma guilt because they want to cut people from their roots. They don't want them grasping for spirituality. They don't want them grasping for God, because once you do, you learn that, there's infinite possibilities and that the world could really change, and they don't want the world to change. So how they keep people down is by traumatizing them, whether that's poverty, whether that's the private prison system. Like in America, if you're a different color, like, you're afraid to even walk down the street because they're trying to keep people on this trauma guilt complex. Because the more you work through your shadows, then the more you realize that you are a divine being and you are, Christ consciousness. So, because that's a dangerous, what's the dangerous message to give? And I always tell people they don't have to go to church. Like, go out in nature, go meditate, do your church.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. That's the message. That's the truth that I think is being kept from most of us, is that you are it. Mm-hmm. You're waiting for a savior. You are it. Look in the mirror, buddy. Yeah. There's your savior. And that's scary, because it's like, now I have to do the work, right? I can't just wait for someone to come from heaven or wherever, a politician, somebody that I'm, no one is coming to save us. No one is coming to help us. The only person that can help you is you. And that is terrifying. But when more and more people figure that out, all of a sudden, as you said, the 1% of the 1%, the ones that are trying to keep us in this cycle of fear, guilt, and shame, they're going to lose their grip, and then the world will change. And I think it's happening now. What do you think?
Yeah. So I, in the next, my visions of the future, like December 21st to 28th, like, I think shit's going to hit the fan. But what I want people to realize is, like, when scary things happen and you feel ungrounded, the most important thing is to raise your vibration and ground yourself. So, if the world's falling down tomorrow, then go sing and dance and play today. And what I also want people to realize is, the foundation of societies has been crumbling for thousands and thousands of years. But, instead of continuing to like try and prop this, crumbling foundation down up, just rip it all down and rebuild. And so for the biggest amount of change, sometimes it could be very scary and ungrounded because you feel like the world's falling apart. But, it's like that tower moment, at least in tarot, the tower, right? Mm-hmm. And the tower is, something's going to happen and you're going to feel ungrounded. But whatever that tower was a system that was not working for so long. So either it comes crumbling down and you accept it and then go and rebuild yourself and society after, or, you know, it's going to come crumbling down anyways, and you're going to be torturing yourself by creating your own suffering. So the biggest amount of change, it does need, you know, to burn down the societies of old in order to go forward. So when things get scary, I just want people to realize that the future is very, very bright, very optimistic. Like, I have seen the most beautiful things of the future. And I can tell you that I literally could not write a more insane, like, sci-fi book than what I see in the future. It's crazy, but it's also so beautiful. So I guess the main message for the future is, you know, my friend says, whether you believe you can or you can't
You're
are
right.
correct.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah. So I just want people to realize that their minds are so strong. Their manifestations are so strong. So the more you unplug from that media bullshit, the more you unplug from social media, and the more you focus internally and on yourself, then the more your reality starts to change outside of you. And if an entire population can start doing that, then that's awesome. And I love that you said that, you know, no one's coming to save you, because in my video yesterday, I said, no one's coming to save you. Everyone expects Jesus in white, shiny robes to come down. But right now, you know, we're at the rise of Christ consciousness, and everyone can get to that point of awakening. Everyone can get to the point of a Kundalini awakening. But that comes with, you know, going through your darkness, going through your shadows, and, you know, healing yourself. And once you do that, then that's when the world opens up to you.
Yeah. And that is scary, because it also may involve letting go who you thought you were. And there's a lot of resistance from the ego. And I think that's what keeps many people from exploring these ideas and, you know, spirituality and things of that nature, is that I think on some level, the ego acknowledges that this is the road, this is the beginning of the end, essentially, for the ego. If a person embarks on this path and begins to earnestly search for answers to some of these questions, it's like, oh crap, I know where this goes. The ego knows where it leads, and it leads to its subjugation. It's no longer going to be running the show anymore. It's going to become a loyal servant, which is what it was always meant to do, right? To help with logistics and survival and things of that nature. But as you said, the problem is our entire society is being run by that aspect of ourselves that was never designed or intended to lead. It was just there to be a helper.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's running amok.
Well, you know, people who hold on to their ego, it's the same concept as someone holding on to this traumatic experience and creating their identity around it. Mm-hmm. But the reason why, you know, they don't want to let it go is because that's all they know.
That's right.
So, and this happens with abusive relationships too, right? So a lot of people won't leave an abusive relationship even though they're being mistreated, because at least they know what to expect in that relationship. And, you know, treating themselves correctly or having self-respect is more scary because they've never been able to do that. And I do want to say, you know, since my awakening, I'm a vastly different person, but it's like I'm a way better person. You know, I was never a bad person, but I was never so conscious or thinking about, you know, others, or, you know, so it's like my personality has changed completely, but for the better. And so I know that for other people, it's very scary, you know, trying to let go of ego and let go of, you know, their past. But I cannot explain enough, like, how beautiful life is for me now. And I, you know, I suffered from, you know, depression, panic attacks, anxiety. I was an alcoholic, always trying to suppress, you know, these traumas and these shadows. But since my awakening, it's like I'm not depressed anymore. I don't have anxiety anymore. Like, I have faith. And I always tell people, faith doesn't have to be in God. But first and foremost, you need to have faith in yourself, even if you're atheist. Or, you know, I'm a physics nerd, and I love quantum mechanics. And I think mathematics is the language to the universe. Mm-hmm. And then if, you know, there's people out there who haven't seen, you know, source or the divine in their life, and, you know, seeing as believing, well, then have faith in mathematics, have faith in yourself. That can be faith, and that's completely okay.
Yeah, it's trust, right? I mean, trust in yourself, trust in the unknown, trust in the universe. And you're right, it doesn't have to be like an anthropomorphic kind of deity or anything like that. It can be nature, it can be whatever you choose to call it. But yeah, no, I completely agree. And been really lovely talking to you, and I love your positivity and what you're doing out there, just trying to help people navigate this weird and wonderful and absurd world that we're living in, especially as you're going through something like a Kundalini awakening or any kind of awakening experience. It can be very jarring and almost traumatic in its own right. So to have people like yourself out there, just like a beacon of light saying, hey, if you're looking, I got something to offer. I think we need more and more people like yourself doing that. So
Thank
thank
you.
you. Yeah, thank you for doing what you do. That's how long have you had your YouTube channel for?
Only a few months.
Yeah, good for you. And
It
you
was
are
So if anyone wants to message me on Instagram, like if they're going through a hard time, um, or I just created a family on Telegram, and I'm going to be holding free classes there. I'm going to come out with a class schedule in like the next week. And it's also just a place, there's a family chat for people to come together and be able to just support each other through their awakenings, or if they're, struggling with addiction or, abuse, anything. It's just completely free. And I just want a place for people to go and meet like-minded people. And so that's on Telegram. If they go to my YouTube on Eve's Rising, it's always in the description box below.
perfect. And I will link all of your things, YouTube, Instagram, Telegram, whatever you got. Just send me the links in an email and I'll make sure that they're in the description of the video below here. And I still feel like there's a lot that I want to talk to you about. We didn't even talk about your, would you coin it a near-death experience, or was it just a death experience?
I mean, I've died twice, so I'm like, no, I was dead. But
Yeah.
then some people are like near death. I don't know. But
Well, you were near it. You were on the other side of it, but you were near it, right? You're not too far gone because you came back. So maybe next time we can chit chat about that. And I'd also love to get into more detail around some of your visions of possible futures and some of the more optimistic things that you alluded to just now about, indescribably beautiful futures. I think we need more awareness of that, because it's really easy to fall into the doom and gloom these days.
Well, everyone wants to know, my doom and gloom visions, but I mean, there are some out there, but I like sharing the beauty of the future because you need something to hold on to.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, thank you very much for making time, for being open and candid and vulnerable with an internet stranger. Yeah, I really appreciate your time. And like I said, if you're willing, I'd love to do it again.
Yeah, that sounds wonderful. And maybe next time we can get more into like psychics and mediums, so other people who are waking up know how to handle those abilities they have.
Yeah, and historically on my channel, it's not something that I've covered off very much, but I think it's such an integral part of many people's awakening experiences that I'm just really thankful to know people like yourself who could speak to those things, because like I said, it's beyond my depth, but I find it fascinating, and I think it will help others who are going through similar things. So thank you once again. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me on, and I will see you next time.
Sounds good. Have a great rest of your Sunday.